There are a few things that anime fans have had to explain to normal people over the years. Power levels, beach episodes, why every protagonist sits by the window. But nothing, and I mean nothing, has haunted anime's reputation in the West quite like one cursed word.
Tentacles.
Yeah, that one. Even people who have never watched hentai know the joke. Tentacles became shorthand for weird anime porn, and somehow one bizarre trope ended up representing an entire corner of adult animation.
But the trope did not appear out of nowhere. Its history connects old Japanese erotic art, censorship laws, monster horror, adult manga, VHS-era anime imports, and Western pop culture turning the weirdest thing it saw into the entire stereotype.
So today, we're looking into the wild history of hentai's most infamous trope, and why, for better or worse, tentacles became impossible to separate from hentai's reputation.
Important note, this video is a history and media culture discussion. We are not showing explicit material, and we are not treating every example of this trope as harmless.
Translation, we're keeping it educational, YouTube. Please don't send me to the Shadow Realm.
To understand why this imagery feels so tied to Japanese erotic media, we have to go back before anime, before VHS tapes, before the internet, and before somebody's cursed hard drive became evidence. In Japan, erotic art has a long history, especially through shunga, a genre of erotic art often associated with ukiyo-e woodblock prints. One of the most famous examples connected to this topic is Katsushika Hokusai's 1814 work commonly known as The Dream of the Fisherman's Wife. The British Museum notes that the idea of pairing an octopus with a diving woman was not even original to Hokusai. Similar imagery existed earlier in Japanese erotic books.
So no, some guy in the 1980s did not just wake up and say, you know what adult animation needs? Seafood trauma. This imagery had history. Weird history, but history.
That does not mean Hokusai invented modern hentai. That would be way too simple. But his work became one of the historical references people bring up when discussing how octopus and tentacle imagery entered erotic Japanese visual culture.
Basically, the ingredients were already floating around. Later, artists just turned the dial from strange historical artwork to what the hell is happening on my screen?
The next major piece is censorship. Japan's Penal Code Article 175 restricts the distribution or public display of obscene materials, including documents, drawings, and electronic records. The official English translation states that violations can carry imprisonment, fines, or both.
And when you tell artists you can't show that, artists usually respond with, okay, but what if I show something technically different?
Exactly. Adult manga and anime creators had to deal with rules around explicit depiction, especially genital censorship. That pushed artists toward abstraction, exaggeration, monsters, fantasy creatures, and non-human anatomy.
Sometimes censorship creates elegance, sometimes it creates clever symbolism, and sometimes it creates a monster with way too many limbs.
Toshio Maeda, the creator most associated with popularizing the modern tentacle trope, has openly described tentacles as a censorship workaround. In an interview, Maeda said adult magazines were strict, and that tentacles allowed physical contact while avoiding direct depiction of human genitalia.
That is one of the wildest examples of technically correct I've ever heard.
In another interview, Maeda described it as a trick to get around censorship, explaining that tentacles were not considered the same as human genitals.
So the tentacle was not just a kink device. It was part monster design, part legal workaround, part horror imagery, and part let's see what the censors let us get away with.
Toshio Maeda is often called the Tentacle Master. And while that title sounds like something you absolutely should not put on a business card, it reflects how closely his name became tied to the trope.
Imagine introducing yourself at a family reunion. Hi, I'm the Tentacle Master. And then Thanksgiving is canceled forever.
Maeda was not the only artist using monsters or erotic horror, but he became one of the figures most associated with turning tentacles into a recognizable adult manga and anime device. The key point is that the trope worked on multiple levels. It was monstrous. It was taboo. It was shocking. It avoided certain censorship problems. And it looked completely unlike mainstream Western adult media.
That combination is why the trope didn't just disappear as some weird one-off experiment. It had utility. Horrible, cursed utility. But utility.
The work most commonly associated with pushing this trope into international recognition is Urotsuki Doji, also known as Legend of the Overfiend. It began as a Japanese erotic horror manga by Toshio Maeda in the mid-1980s and was adapted into original video animation releases starting in 1987.
This was not just adult anime. This thing was a full cocktail of demons, apocalypse, body horror, fantasy violence, and sexual content that made people question whether animation had any chill whatsoever. Spoiler, it did not.
The OVA format mattered. Original video animation was made for home video rather than television broadcast, which gave creators more room for extreme content. Hyperallergic notes that Urotsuki Doji's OVA format helped allow the kind of excess that became its reputation.
And when the stuff made its way west, it did not arrive quietly. For a lot of people, this was their introduction to the idea that animation from Japan was not just cartoons for kids. It could be violent, sexual, surreal, and completely unhinged.
The theatrical film version was released in North America on VHS in 1993 by Central Park Media under the Anime 18 label and was rated NC-17.
Which is basically the 1990s way of saying, do not watch this with your parents unless you want your entire bloodline to feel awkward.
In the West, anime already had an image problem. For many casual viewers, animation was associated with children's entertainment. So when adult anime crossed over through imports, conventions, VHS tapes, and specialty labels, it created cultural whiplash.
You had people going from Saturday morning cartoons to apocalyptic demon hentai like they accidentally opened the wrong dimensional portal.
Extreme examples travel faster than ordinary examples because they are easier to talk about. They shock people. They become jokes. They become warnings. They become stereotypes.
And tentacles were perfect for that. They were visually bizarre, they were impossible to explain casually, they were easy to parody, and they gave people who barely understand anime one simple punchline. Anime is weird.
That is how one adult trope became shorthand for an entire medium in Western pop culture. Not because it represented all anime, not because it represented all hentai, but because it was strange, memorable, and easy to reduce into a joke.
The average person didn't need to watch hentai to know the tentacle joke. The joke escaped containment.
The trope stuck because it fits multiple genres at once. In horror, tentacles suggest monsters, loss of control, body horror, and the unknown. In fantasy, they allow impossible creatures and supernatural encounters. In science fiction, they can become aliens, experiments, mutations, or cosmic entities. In parody, they are instantly recognizable. And in internet culture, they became a meme.
It's basically the Swiss Army knife of cursed adult animation. Meet a monster? Tentacles. Need censorship workaround? Tentacles. Need the audience to immediately understand this is the weird part? Tentacles.
But there is also a darker side. Many examples of the trope are coercive or assault-coded, which is part of why it became infamous rather than merely famous.
Yeah, this isn't one of those tropes where they pretend everything is harmless and quirky. A lot of its history gets uncomfortable fast. That discomfort is part of the reputation.
That is why the trope sits at a strange intersection. Art history, censorship, fantasy, horror, taboo, exploitation, and parody.
Today, the tentacle joke is bigger than the actual genre. It shows up in memes, it shows up in anime jokes, it shows up whenever somebody wants to make an easy Japan is weird punchline, and honestly, half the people making the joke probably have no idea where it came from.
Which is why the history matters. Because the trope was not just random weirdness. It came from older visual traditions, censorship pressure, adult manga experimentation, horror aesthetics, and international distribution.
Still cursed though.
Very cursed.
Educationally cursed.
That is the brand.
So no, tentacles did not become infamous just because somebody woke up one day and said, you know what anime needs? More seafood trauma.
The trope survived because it had history behind it, legal pressure pushing it forward, artists willing to make it extreme, and Western audiences ready to turn the weirdest thing they saw into the entire reputation of hentai.
It's old art, censorship loophole, monster horror, adult animation, internet meme, and cultural misunderstanding all wrapped into one very uncomfortable package.
And while it does not represent all hentai, and definitely does not represent all anime, it became one of the most recognizable symbols attached to both in Western pop culture.
And that is how tentacles became hentai's most infamous trope. And if you enjoyed this cursed little history lesson, like the video, subscribe, and let me know what weird gaming, anime, or internet rabbit hole we should dive into next.
Preferably one with fewer limbs.
No promises.
I have an idea. Get naked. What did you say? If it works, it works. On my wiener. No, you did though. You did though. Remember? I did though. Scab, what do you have me making, man? Oh, Scab. Hush.